Hi, my name is Yi-Xian. I'm the CEO of EtonHouse. I'm one of the two Singaporeans, or maybe the only Singaporean, who's a product of the Singapore education system, but I lead an international education group. EtonHouse is 100% owned by our founder, who in this case is my mother. EtonHouse was already imprinted on me because I grew up with it. You can say it's the sibling younger than me. And so I asked myself, what would happen to the company if something happened to my mother? My life's purpose is to make as big of an impact as possible through EtonHouse and by touching lives. EtonHouse is an education group based in Singapore. We have more than 100 schools based throughout Asia. So of our 100 schools, most of them are preschools, but we also have about a dozen K-12 schools. So you can segment us into childcare and international schools, as well as affordable schools and preschools. So you can say with that, we have 4 modalities. So we have affordable preschools, which is eBridge. eBridge is an anchor operator in the heartlands. eBridge today has about 5,500 students, so it's quite large. Then we have EtonHouse childcare centers, EtonHouse preschool, we have EtonHouse International School, and then we have Middleton International School. So actually I am the group CEO, and the group CEO, I have to look after different geographies. So to put it another way, when you're group CEO, it's you, the buck stops here. Yeah, so I have country CEOs below me. Actually, this is a very good question because there's very little content that actually addresses this question very directly. And it took me meeting a very successful founder who's exited, who kind of distilled it down very simply to me. Because the problem about being a CEO is that you can do anything you want. So you can get too deep in the weeds anywhere, and no company is created the same. So for example, if you're a tech company, let's say you're Steve Jobs, he can get very into product design. I mean, Tim Cook that comes in after him is barely into product design. I mean, everyone treats this role very differently. It's a product of the person and the problems that they face in their company. So I think when you distill it down, what a CEO's role is very simple. It's setting the strategy of the organization, so setting the plan, communicating the plan to everyone, because if you say you don't tell anyone, no use also. So yes, you have to set the plan, communicate it, and then find people for the organization, empower them, and then keep them accountable. That's when you really distill it down, that's actually all you do. The problem is, I think there's a +1 to this definition that was given to me, which is business development, where I don't know of a single CEO who doesn't try to help grow his company directly himself. I think it's somewhat arguable because in theory your team is supposed to do this for you, but the reality is that oftentimes the team can only bring it so far. So when you really come down to this, it comes down to what a CEO does. It's really making the plan, communicating it, finding people, holding them accountable. That's the bare basics. I was the ops manager. The problem was we realized very quickly that no one externally was taking an ops manager seriously. So I was basically the +1, so our then assistant CEO was walking in and I was his +1. So then I had to be an ops director. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll be an ops director. But yeah, from there on, it worked out. Yeah, my role at first was look after our schools in Singapore. So you're accountable to everything that happens in the school, right? Even the light is not on from the outside, it's your responsibility. Basically means that you're a general manager. Yeah, but it's a small pool of schools at the beginning.
How many schools?
At first, I think day one was like 6. I think back then we had 13 schools. So the 6 became 13 after about half a year. Then that portfolio, I was in charge of that portfolio for quite a fair bit. And then I was in charge of corporate functions. And then after corporate functions, that eventually became like, okay, we need you in the room to talk about our schools in China. Then it became everything. In my case, yes, I have a chance to work with my mother. And I think for both of us, it's a learning experience for both parties. But and you both have to segregate your professional self and your personal self. But I think it's very unique. Actually, it's quite simple. You have to realize that at work, your mother's your boss in this case. You know, and actually that's a big separation to have. And that's something that I had to learn from other family businesses, where at work, if this wasn't your mother, if this was your boss, would you behave this way? I had you could say, a win pretty early on in my career, where I realized that there wasn't an affordable international school option in Singapore that was of high quality. And in a way, my personal life had an impact on this, because I used to climb a lot. So I used to rock climb after work. And one of my climbing buddies, he worked at one of the big oil companies here. And he said, oh, you know, our head of engineering, he's Filipino and he had to go back to the Philippines. So I said, oh, why? And he said, because this guy was an engineer. He said, yeah, I'm pretty bummed up about it because he's a great guy, but yeah, he just couldn't afford the school fees. And I said, oh, funny you say that. I actually operate international schools in Singapore. So it's like, yeah, I thought the company was paying for it. And he said, no, the company's not paying for it. And you know, he's got 6 children. So I said, okay, I can understand why this is a problem. But then I kind of sat down and then I asked myself, okay, is there a possibility to create a more affordable international school? And I did the math and I realized that with cheap rent and with a mix of teachers from Singapore as well as from expatriate countries, then we are able to actually bring down the school fee and to almost halve it, in fact. So this is Middleton International School. And when we launched, it was full very quickly. And then we won a government tender to operate a large campus shortly thereafter. So this school exists in Tampines today. And then we had 3 months to renovate a site with no power and no water. And it's a 1,000 student capacity site, right? So it's a massive site, it's more than a hectare, about a hectare and a half or so. So that's interesting, with no power and no water. I think I almost physically killed myself because it was just so exhausting. And after that experience, it brought me to my first meditation retreat because I was burnt out. So after 3 months of setting up a school on such tight timeline, I had parents who were cycling into the renovation premises a couple of days before school opening going, hey, are you sure it's going to be ready? They were like, trust us, it's going to be ready. And yeah, it was ready on time. But yeah, it was tough, yeah. So after setting up our affordable international school campus in Tampines, I was physically and emotionally just burnt out, exhausted. The school was up and running. I was not. And a good friend of mine was always telling me, hey, go for meditation retreats. And then he texted me going like, hey, by the way, you know, there's this like really interesting guy doing a retreat in the US. So I was like, okay, I think I'll just go for it. So I even forgot to tell this guy that I went for it. So I just booked the plane ticket, flew over to the US, and I showed up in this meditation retreat. But yes, this retreat was useful for me because I felt myself quieten down to this point that I could hear my heartbeat. And it was a very unique experience. And I think that's actually helped me to get me where I am, where in tough situations, I'm able to separate or at least quieten the ego down. And I'm not perfect, but then to be able to look at the situation as is. I've been lucky to have altered experiences during retreats where I guess you meditate a lot and then you get to a point where like boom, you get like you feel like a nuclear bomb is going off in your mental space. For us, we don't operate a big K-12 school outside of Singapore and China. And I think that's the next step for us. So a lot of my work is to make that happen. Yeah. You know, CEOs get all the crap, so the crap goes upwards, and that the CEO you never get good news. you generally only get bad news. And that's when the system is working well. Because if the system is working well, you get some good news and then the real problems come up to you. Because everything else in theory can be delegated. And I feel like no one wants crisis to show up at your doorstep every day. Yeah, but unfortunately they do come. And when they come, yeah, that's your moment where there's an element of make it or break it, where people are going to remember how you act. I think if you act very poorly or you act well, people will remember it. If you act just enough, I think okay, I can. So I think for me, at the moment in time, I think I'm lucky that maybe it's for the mindfulness practices. Maybe the reality is that being in the army maybe helped dealing with people who don't want to be in the army but yet you're the leader. Maybe that helped. But whatever it was, and I think the other thing is maybe being around dinner time conversations where I grew up hearing my mom and my father talk about crises at work at the dinner table. Maybe all of this kind of trickled down to me. So I'm lucky that I think for my first start in my work, I was able to turn to whether it's my mother, my uncle, say, what will you do in these situations? And then as time passed by, because sometimes you feel their solutions aren't the solutions that are required, where I was able to find my own way. So like it or not, it's part and parcel of the job. You wouldn't be doing the job if the stuff didn't come your way, and you have to rise up above it. So I think that the crux of this actually, I would say, is that when all is said and done, and you've done what you have to do at work, who are you at home? I think that's the problem. So when you come home and you're just destroyed, so all your emotional energy is gone now, right? I think the real test is when your spouse is there and your spouse needs some love, or your children need some love, are you able to be there? I think 50-50. I think look, we're all human. I think the trouble is look, there are moments in time, I think there's an element of boundaries. I've been guilty of telling my wife, dear, I'm sorry, I'm not here right now. There's nothing here. I've had a really tough day. I'm sorry. And the element, you hope that those days, that there are more of the good days that are able to offset the bad days in that regard. But I think that the family unfortunately has a better brunt on this. I think the first instances where I learned how to work together with the family was dinner. Because when I came back home and I had dinner with my family, it's natural to talk about your day. But day is work. And when you talk about work, there's going to be a difference in opinion. So it became very obvious for my brother and my sister, because they were cut out of the conversation, which is not okay. I mean, then you're excluding people. So we had to learn how to actually not talk about work. And if we talk about work, I would preface it by saying, hey, I'm going to talk about work, but a funny story. Can I talk about that?
Ask for permission.
Well, yeah, and then my brothers also learned where, and this still happens today, where if let's say it's gone too much about work, he will actually say, can we bring the conversation back? So it's something that we've had to learn. And today with 3 children of my own, now none of the conversations are about work. Now it's all about them. So, yeah. So I'll zoom out a bit. So there are actually a fair number of businesses, especially in Asia, which are family-owned businesses. And I think that the reality is that as time goes on, naturally more of these businesses will become professionalized. So you can look at it 2 extremes, right? You have a very hyper-traditional family business, and then you have an MNC. And then there are many, many shades of grey in between. I would dare say that the beauty about family business is that we care about people first and foremost, maybe to a fault. And then at MNCs, everyone's expendable and it's very political, and then it's a rise to the top, and that's the way it is. And I do feel that in a family business, relationships are important and critical, but I also feel that family businesses are able to move much, much quicker than other organizations, because the board of directors might only be 2 people. And then an empowerment is actually given very quickly sometimes once trust is earned. So it has the capacity to be very nimble. And I think for a lot of professionals, they ask themselves oh, I don't want to join this company because it's a family business. The reality is that not all family businesses are created the same. Each of them are very unique. And just as how every MNC is very unique. So I would encourage everyone, don't shut yourself out from a business just because it's a family business, and seek to understand first before making a judgment. And maybe what you see is like, oh, that could be a place that your career could really grow, and that you can make a bigger impact, and that you'll be able to actually enjoy trust and be able to have speed of movement. And I think one of the special things about EtonHouse is that as a family business, us as a family, we always want to be there for the people who work with us. So more than half of my principals have worked with us for more than 10 years, and a fair number of them for many years, more than that. I've known a few of our principals since I was a boy. For me, it's, I mean, when I remember one of our principals, her mother passed away. And this was relatively early in my career at EtonHouse. And I jumped on a plane, flew off to somewhere in Malaysia, drove 2 hours to go for the wake, and then repeated the process back. So I remember sharing this with some of my friends in the corporate world. And they said like, oh, what's the return on investment of that 1 day of your time? I said, we don't think of it that way. We think of it as if someone's given more than 10 years to be part of something. It's the least you can do for someone. Then the same person said, isn't that what like white gold pay Kim is for? Like you just wire the money, pay now. And I said, you can just pay now, but I think there's an element of humanity that has to be there. So I grew up with that, and I think that I think maybe all that religion and all the meditation has helped me be able to hold space for myself. So I mean, there are cases where there are sudden deaths in people's families, and that's always very hard on everyone. And so how do you make space for that person? How do you support that person and their family? And also, this is where it gets a bit pseudo-capitalist, socialist. It's like, the person might not be ready to come back to work. So how do you leave as much space as possible for this person to come back when this person comes back? Then when this person comes back, is this person the same person as what was there before? Sometimes not. And so you have to do the right thing for the school, first and foremost, but at the same time, you try and do the right thing for the person, especially the person's done like many years of service for us.